What is up, guys? Welcome to this Who Dat Breakdown episode of the Jenks Island podcast, the only podcast where you get your takes from a washed-up Division III cornerback. As always, I'm your host, Grayson Jenkins, and in today's episode, I'm going to be breaking down basically the Saints' terrible season, right? Terrible season, terrible loss to the Buccaneers that left a really bad taste in our mouth because of the Mike Evans record being achieved on the final play of the game after Darren Rizzi, the defense. None of them fought to put three guys on Mike Evans just to shut that down. I'll be getting to that in a little bit. But first of all, I want to get into the loss versus the Bucs in general, right? Because Spencer Rattler, first half, seemingly balling out, dealing dimes all over the field. He had Tom Brady literally going, "Oh my God," to that throw, to the throw to Juwan Johnson, deep across the field in the first half. Like Tom Brady was gushing over Spencer Rattler. In the second half, Spencer Rattler's accuracy goes to shit. He can't throw the football accurately at all. It's just the second or third time we've seen this from him recently. Because obviously the second half throughout this season, we've had a little bit of offensive struggles with Clint Kubiak. You'll have a first half offense seemingly dialed in, balling out, driving down the field really easily. And that's when he has the scripted plays, scripted drives drawn up. And then the second half hits, Clint Kubiak seemingly makes no adjustments to the defense. No adjustments. And then the second half, the offense struggles, stalls out, can't get any points on the scoreboard. The defense struggles to keep up. And that's when we saw a lot of losses happening. And then in this week's especially, they got outscored. Let me double check what the outscoring was, but they got outscored by a lot in the second half. And it was because the defense was on the field for the majority of the second half. You saw it in the first half where the the offense was on the field for the majority of the first half. The Bucs only had the ball for about maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So it was 60-6, end of second quarter. By the end of the game, it was 27-19. So that's a 21-13 outscoring, or to 3 outscoring. Like that can't happen in the second half at all. Like 3 touchdowns to 1 field goal. Come on. You couldn't get in field goal range more than one time. Like, obviously, the end of the game, they're in field goal range, but you need a touchdown, so that's not what I'm talking about. But that offense, Clint Kubiak seemingly struggles. We're down all of our starters. Obviously, the skill positions are all out. So I get that we're working with guys like Dante Pettis, Kevin Austin Jr., MVS, who is a good receiver, but you can't rely on him as the number one. He's a solid 3 or 4 guy in the NFL. And if we're able to bring him back, which I'll talk about in a little bit, he should be the 3 or 4 for the Saints team because he is a solid, like, down the field target with good height. And that's what you need to add to this offense in addition to Shaheed and Olave. Anyways, I think the QB future discussion needs to be talked about as well, right? We have Derek Carr on the roster for another year. Or 2 years technically, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, he'll play next year, then we'll cut him, or we could cut him this year. Just cut our losses, things like that. Save a little bit more money than we would if we cut him next year." The thing with that is Derek Carr won all 5 of our games this year. We did not win a game without Derek Carr. I think that's something that needs to be talked about when a lot of Saints fans don't like Derek Carr. I'm not the biggest Derek Carr fan. But he did win us games. He's a serviceable quarterback. He's an average quarterback in the NFL. And when you give him a decent roster, he can win games. If you give him a shit roster with no weapons or anything, he's not going to win games because he's not a win because of quarterback. He's a win with quarterback. And that's not what the Saints need right now. So basically, yes, Derek Carr should be cut this offseason, not because he is a bad quarterback, but because he doesn't suit what the Saints need at this time. The Saints need a quarterback that they can kind of just roll with for next season, which is Spencer Rattler. You put in Spencer Rattler because you're not in a position to draft a quarterback. You don't have a roster where if you draft a quarterback, it fixes everything. Most likely, if you draft a quarterback this offseason, it wouldn't be Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders. And you'd be throwing them into a team that's not necessarily ready to win right away. And then when that happens, their development could be hurt. So if you put in Spencer Rattler next season, you let him develop each and every single game after you could see growth each week that he started throughout the season. You saw some growth. Against the Broncos, the guy was panicking on every single drop back. And this game against the Bucs, When there was pressure in his face, he had to throw a few really good throws. The slant to Juwan Johnson, a very, very good throw, was hit right after he threw the ball. So some growth is what you want to see. And going into next year, if you draft a couple weapons and some good defensive players, you're just adding youth and young talent to this team in order to develop it around Spencer Rattler. And then if Spencer Rattler still sucks next year, not still sucks, but he sucks next year, then you get a good draft pick and then you worry about drafting a quarterback in 2026. Then if you don't want to go with Spencer Rattler, the new coach comes in, whoever the head coach is going to be. If we get a new head coach and they don't want Spencer Rattler, they don't want Derek Carr, then the only answer, because again, like I said, unless you trade up, you're really not most likely getting a quarterback in this draft that's first round talent. You need to go and get a free agent veteran. And Sam Darnold could possibly be that guy, but like we saw on Sunday night, he is not the guy. You could take Kirk Cousins from Atlanta. You'd have to trade for him. Now that doesn't really make a lot of sense either. I don't see the veteran quarterback option being realistic to this team. I see them maybe getting Andy Dalton, something like that, and having a backup for Spencer Rattler. But you deserve to have Spencer Rattler out there developing as a quarterback next year. I think that's the way the team goes, in my eyes, at least. That's the way I think they should go. Anyways, moving on from the quarterback discussion, the worst thing I saw from this Saints team in 2024 was what they did and how they handled the Mike Evans record situation to end the game on Sunday. And here's why. Because when we had Sean Payton, when you have Marshawn Lattimore, Mike Evans was the biggest op to this team, right? Him and Marshawn Lattimore got in numerous fights. He had numerous cheap shots on Marshawn Lattimore and different players throughout their matchups against the Buccaneers for all those years that Marshawn Lattimore was here. And we relatively shut down Mike Evans every year with Lattimore here. And whether or not that's DA's scheme, whether or not that's Lattimore, whatever. Mike Evans was not successful most of the games that we played the Buccaneers. Then you come into this game, and we have Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry. Kool-Aid played him pretty well all game. And I'll say all the guys that covered him were playing pretty well. Ugo Amadi, not a coverage guy. Him and man-on-man coverage should never have happened this year. Joe Woods, I don't understand why he was scheming that up a lot of this game. But Ugo Amadi should not be in man coverage. That gave Evans a good amount of yards. But Mike Evans going into the final play after the Buccaneers have already clinched the game, and if they lose, they could possibly miss out on the playoffs. They're coming out and risking everything to get Mike Evans 5 yards, and your whole team knows it. And you just go, oh, well, let's all play man coverage. Alontae, you either cover him or you don't. You should have 2 to 3 guys there preventing that at all costs. This is your rival. This is a guy that has not treated your team like, oh, they're the Saints. They're some good guys. Like Mike Evans hates you and you hate Mike Evans. So why are you just allowing him to get this? Oh, it's $3 million. The NFL's a brotherhood. So what? So what? I've never seen teams do that. I've never once seen teams when the Saints got Jamal Williams a touchdown to end the game against the Falcons, everyone complained. Every single person outside the Saints was like, that's Bush League. This wasn't Bush League just because it's a record, a 1,000-yard season for the 11th straight time. You know how many yards you have to have in a 17-game season? 58 or 59. That shouldn't be hard if you're a receiver one and you're 6'4", 6'5" like Mike Evans. I'm not saying this to hate on Mike Evans. I'm not saying this isn't a cool record to have. I'm saying if he got it in the regular span of the game, that's fine. I would support it. I would clap. I would say props to you, whatever. But going out and stat padding after the game's already won, intentionally telling everyone what is going to happen. They're throwing the ball to Mike Evans. And then the Saints not putting at least 2 to 3 guys out there or specifically pressing him on the line and not letting him move off the line. That is horrific coaching. That is horrific scheming. And it really is soft as shit from the players. I didn't appreciate, I don't think any of the fans are sitting out there like, why, we support that. I don't think any other fans did that. Now, I would love to see if a player comes out and someone asked one of the players, hey, what was going on in that play? Did you guys purposely let Mike Evans get that just so he could get the money, whatever? Like, you could ask them that. And if they say that, yeah, it was like a brotherhood kind of thing, sure, whatever. But I don't think it was that. I just think it was mis-scheming not really caring enough, focusing on, oh, the season's about to end. We can move on from this season, yada, yada, yada. Show some heart. So show some heart, show some passion, and stop the damn guy from getting that record. That would at least showed some heart going into the end of the season, ending the year. Instead, they just left us with a really bad taste in our mouth to end the year. And I'm hoping that changes next year with this head coach coming in. The culture gets changed. Whatever. Get that shit out of here. I'm looking forward to a tough team that wants to compete week in, week out. And I'm sure as hell Sean Payton and Marshawn Lattimore would not have let that happen going into the end of the season. It was a very disappointing ending to the game. I called my dad up. I was like, "Did you see what they just did? Like, did you see that this team just was like, just let him do that?" Because it was a 5 yard out route. It wasn't a tough route to cover either. It was just really frustrating. I could be completely overreacting. I want to know what you guys think. Comment down below what your guys' thoughts on the Mike Evans situation were. But it really pissed me off. Anyways, my next topic: who should the Saints bring back that are going into free agency this offseason? So Jeff Nowak, I hope I pronounced that right, put out a list of all the expiring deals on the Saints right now. We got Peyton Turner, Chase Young, Tano Passanio, Willie Gay, Will Harris, Ugo Amadi, Juwan Johnson, Shane Lemo, Ali Udo, Landon Young, Dante Pettis, MVS, and Adam Prentice. And then the IR guys, the main one of note that I would bring back is Paulson Adebo. So outside of Paulson Adebo, who should be brought back to this team, you need him at CB1, you need Kool-Aid at CB2, and you need to move Alante into nickel. Alante was killing it on the inside this year. I think he was playing at an all-pro level at the nickel position this season. As soon as he got moved to outside, you could see he was uncomfortable. He wasn't trained for that position this offseason. That's not where he's comfortable at this point in time. Maybe if he trained the whole offseason, he would be. But I think he is a very, very good slot. And his stats and then his ratings, pass coverage and run coverage showed that. He's a better run defender and tackler than he has a coverage guy. You put him in the slot where he only has to cover a little bit. He still has to cover a lot, right? When I'm not saying he's not gonna have to cover people, but he can get his nose into the run plays, things like that, a lot easier. That's where he's more comfortable and where he balled out a lot better this offseason or this season. Anyways, from that list of guys that Jeff Nowak posted, the only guys I'm bringing back, Juwan Johnson, depending on the contract, because he has decent games, right? And if Spencer Rattler's coming back, he likes to feed the tight ends, and Juwan Johnson's a decent target at receiver. And we weren't paying too much, like $6 million a year. I really wouldn't mind that. Will Harris definitely deserves to come back. He showed some juice every single game when he was on the field, and you could see the passion week in, week out with him on the field on defense. And you didn't necessarily see that with a lot of guys this year. And the only other guy I would bring back is MVS. That's the only surefire guy. Maybe like Dante Pettis is a depth piece to this receiver room. And that's about it. Tano Passanio maybe as a depth piece as well. Chase Young, I could see them bringing back if the salary's right, but I think he's going to get priced out of out of New Orleans. I could see him walking for a higher contract. So I would go Dante Pettis, MVS, Juwan Johnson, Will Harris, and Paulson Adebo. Those are the only guys you're bringing back. You're saving on the salary cap. You're letting all the other guys walk, and you don't have to worry about it. Next, talking about our head coach future. Obviously, Darren Rizzi came in as interim head coach, and he came into a very, very tough spot. Right, we're talking a lot of injuries. A team that's very, very deflated. They don't really have anything to play for. They're coming off a 7-game losing streak. Some of the guys are pissed about that, yeah, but they're like, season's kind of getting to that point where they know that they're not playing for anything, right? So as an interim head coach, you could come in there deflated, say, "You guys, I'm here. I'm your head coach, but we don't really expect much." But he didn't do that. Dan Rizzi came in, basically turned the whole culture around for the few weeks he was the head coach, and he won 3 games. He won more than and then Dennis Allen won 2-7. Darren Rizzi comes in and wins 3 games, and obviously lost a few games that probably should have been won, and then lost very, very badly to the Packers. And I don't know if that's Darren Rizzi's fault. I don't know if that's a preparation thing or what, but he did turn things around on a few key pieces. The soft tissue injuries decreased when Darren Rizzi came in and set up the activation period. He changed the locker around, turned the culture around, and a lot of guys are voicing their support for him. I think if Darren Rizzi came back next season as the head coach, I think a lot of players wouldn't mind that. You just need good coordinators underneath him because Darren Rizzi can be a leader. He can be that guy, but he's not an offensive minded or defensive minded coach. And that kind of hurts in that situation. You want one of those guys. One of the things you want in a head coach is that they can run the defense or they can run the offense. Darren Rizzi doesn't necessarily do that. And we see that with Dan Campbell in Detroit. So maybe Darren Rizzi could be that kind of guy, but you need to hit on the coordinators coming in. And I think Clint Kubiak needs to go in that situation. Now, the list of interviewees or requested interviews so far are Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, the Eagles offensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator for the Lions, former Saint coach as well, Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver, and the Giants offensive coordinator and assistant head coach Mike Kafka. Now, out of that list, the only two that give me any hope or aspirations would be Aaron Glenn and Joe Brady. Joe Brady, obviously, we see what he's doing in Buffalo, and he's been a solid coach throughout his career as a coach. And I think you see what he does with the weapons that he has in Buffalo. And obviously, yes, you have Josh Allen. You don't really need to do a lot of coaching to have Josh Allen excel. Maybe Josh Allen is the one that got Brian Daboll his job in New York. Maybe without Josh Allen, he might not be as successful, Joe Brady. I still think he could be a decent coach. And that's something interesting. As a 35-year-old, you kind of want a young-minded guy to be the new head coach. You don't want an older person. Aaron Glenn on the other side, defensive-minded head coach, former coach under Sean Payton. I know a lot of people are really pissed. They want Sean Payton era to be over completely. They don't want anyone who's coached with Sean Payton. But none of you guys would take Dan Campbell if he was available. You're telling me you wouldn't want a guy like Dan Campbell to come in and turn this team around just because he coached under Sean Payton? I think that's kind of bullshit. I think that's unfair to these candidates. Aaron Glenn could be a damn good head coach, and we wouldn't know it. I don't think his relation to Sean Payton should matter. His coaching under Sean Payton should matter. You let him come in and interview, and if he blows your socks off, he blows your socks off, and you got to hire him as the head coach, period. You get this defense humming again, Spencer Rattler could maybe win a couple more games if he's not playing from behind as often. And yes, obviously this game, he kind of played from behind because of his fault. The offense's fault, right? They didn't score enough points in the second half. The defense was on the field the whole time. That hurts. And that happened a few of his times out there. But I think the defense just needs to be, the culture needs to be changed. You add some young pieces, and with a defensive-minded head coach going into the draft, you get some more defensive guys. I think that roster needs to be shored up a lot. And that leads me to my next topic, the lost defense. The defense was bottom 10 in a lot of categories this year, and that means that we lost a lot of what we had the last 6 years, 6 to 8 years. The last 6 to 8 years, we had a very good defense that we could rely on every single week to at least keep the team in a competitive position. This year, that wasn't the case. The running defense sucked. And that was mainly because of the defensive line. The linebackers were iffy outside of Demario Davis and Pete Werner. The safeties didn't play very well. The cornerbacks were all over the place each week as well. So that's all four position groups had different issues throughout the season. And at nose tackle, at defensive tackle, you got Brian Bresee. Nathan Shepard wasn't very great. Passanio was all right when he was able to play. Colin Saunders did a pretty good job for what he is. Like, I'm just going to be honest. He's decent at stopping the run. He's decent at pass rush. Like, he's a decent defensive tackle. Is he a star? He's not a star. He's not an Aaron Donald, obviously. Like, well, that's not what we're talking about. But he was a decent player. Brian Bresee, decent. Really good in the pass rush. Led the team in sacks. Terrible in the run game. And that's something he knows he needs to work on. And I expect him to work on that. And I think he'll improve next year. Cornerbacks, you got to draft a corner. Safety, you got to draft a safety. Defense, linebackers, Pete Werner, then the rest are question marks. Demario Davis is going to leave soon. He might retire after this season. Who knows? He might retire this offseason. Like, we have no clue what Demario Davis is going to do. If he does that, you sure as shit need to draft a linebacker. Because the guys other than Pete Werner, I don't think they're ready yet. I just don't think they are. So I think going into this offseason, you need to draft a lot of young talent for that defensive side of the ball. And maybe at the number 9 pick, Maybe you trade back, get a couple extra picks, and you just draft best player available. Each pick, get as many picks in the top 100, accrue the most picks, and draft whoever is best player available every single pick. Load the roster up with some young talent, because that's what the Saints need to do, because the last few drafts have been really, really bad. Not talked about enough. They're really, really bad. And that's kind of the discussion with Mickey Loomis. Is he ready to stay as the GM, or do we need to promote him, put him at president, kind of keep him with the Saints, but he's no longer the GM in charge of the roster? They might need to do that. The defensive end choices, we went 0 for 3 in the last 3 picks at defensive end. That's horrific. That cannot happen. If you want a defensive end, you better pick a good one. And we've missed 3 straight times. And one of those times, we picked someone over Lamar Jackson. We're seeing what he's doing, and he's about to get his 3rd MVP in the last 8 years. That's crazy. So again, I think this roster, at least on defense, needs picks everywhere. The offensive side of the ball, offensive tackle, you feel pretty good about going into this offseason. If you see a blue chip offensive tackle that you could put at right tackle and maybe move Trevor Penning into guard in the draft, you might do that. But you need another receiver. You need a tight end. You might get a quarterback, and you might get a running back. Receiver, you need a guy that's a big body type of guy that can do everything. Chris Olave can do everything. He's not a big body guy, and we see that hurting him in his career with concussions, injuries, things like that. Then you got Shaheed. Yeah, he's a great playmaker when he gets the ball, but his route running isn't the best, so that's something he's going to get polished this offseason after he recovers from his injury. MVS, if you bring him back, that's a good trio. And you add a number 1B kind of guy. Like you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. You need 2 number 1s, 2 dominant number 1s. You get Chris Olave, you get another. That's dangerous for the Saints. I could see them doing that. Maybe an offensive guard. You need an offensive guard. The depth there is absolutely horrific. Cesar Ruiz seemed lost without Eric McCoy. You bring back Eric McCoy and you draft. Not bring back. You obviously have Eric McCoy in the future, but I mean, you need to get a backup. You need to get a backup behind him that you can rely on. Then you get a guard. Then you get a receiver. You load up on defense, and you need a tight end. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Dallin Holker, Taysom Hill. Those 4 guys, question marks every single week. Foster Moreau, great leader, great person, but he's not the do-it-all receiver that you need. He's a good possession receiver, but he's not a huge weapon that teams are going to be like, oh, shit, they got Foster Moreau. He's not a Travis Kelce. He's not a Brock Bowers, anything like that. But if you could get a number 1 tight end that teams fear, then you have him as your Josh Hill type of guy. That would be awesome. Taysom Hill, you can worry about him, put him in his role as a focus on running the ball. Wildcat, things like that. Put his body in worse and less harmful position. Get a tight end that you could put as just a top weapon, can block, do everything. Josh Hill type is your Foster Moreau. Maybe Juwan Johnson walks, and maybe you have Dallin Holker back next year. That's the solution. I mean, you just pick as many players as possible, and you fill those needs. That's all the Saints need to do this offseason to at least build in 2025. You're not going to be a Super Bowl winner in 2025. You're not going to be necessarily the most competitive team in 2025, but you want to build up to it. You want to look like you're building up to it, and that's similar to what we see Carolina doing this year. Carolina, at the end of the year, Bryce Young looks really good. The offense is humming. Defense, not so much, but the offense looks really good, and you could see the fans hopeful for something. You can see the team building up to something, and that's what we want to see the Saints do next offseason. So I want to see the Saints do next offseason. So I want to hear what you guys think about what my takes. And I hear what you guys want the Saints to do, who you want the Saints to pick, things like that. And I'm going to start digging into some prospects, figuring out some needs. And I'll post some episodes of the Saints, start interviewing people. The Saints hire some coaches, things like that. I will start posting episodes about those. I'll react to those. But until then, this is going to be my episode for the season breakdown. This will be my last episode until any major Saints news. But comment down below, you guys, what you think the Saints should do this offseason, and I will get back to you in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. As always, check out Jenks Island on social medias and all of our episodes wherever you get podcasts. I'll see you guys next time. Who dat?